Hi everybody, I'm JJ. You're watching Reality Survival. So today I was just going to talk a little bit about the idea of having a pool for a water source in an SHTF kind of situation. First off, can you do it? Will it work? Sure, it will. It'll hold water and you can get water out of it, and that water is probably going to be in better shape than the water out of a pond or a lake or something like that. However, it ain't going to be perfect. So that is a look at our pool after being closed for a while, since last summer. And it's obviously not ideal, right? So you are going to need to think of, if you're not constantly adding, chemicals to it and chlorine to it, and you're not constantly running that filter, which takes a lot of electricity and all that kind of stuff, your pool is going to look like that pretty quick. And that's okay. It can still be used, but you're going to need to boil the water, or at least at a minimum, run it through a large or like a Berkey water filter or an Alexa Pure Pro water filter, or something that will remove, the chemicals that you put into it. Okay, and because most of the chemicals will evaporate, especially the chlorine, the majority of it will evaporate over time, and it's not going to stay in there, but there is some residual left over. And so before you would drink that, you want to make sure that you have purified it and made it safe to drink. The best way is probably going to be, what I would probably do if it were me is I would get some 5-gallon buckets, and I would swish those. I would run the water back and forth in the 5-gallon buckets probably 4 or 5 times, let it sit for a couple hours, repeat that process, and do that 2 or 3 times. Then I would take that water after I had let it sit and settle, and then I would run it through the Alexa Pure Pro or Berkey water filter. Then it's probably good to go. But just to be sure, I would probably, if it wasn't like a real critical situation, if I had the resources to be able to boil the water, I would probably boil it, maybe add some bleach to sterilize it as well. You just want to be sure about it, because there is a lot of nastiness in this stuff. You put a lot of different chemicals and all that kind of thing in there, and so you wouldn't want to be drinking it without ensuring that you've got some really good filtration and or some sort of sterilization by re-adding some chlorine, and that is primarily for organic materials that develop in it while it's closed. So I'm talking about bacteria, cysts, protozoa, potentially cryptosporidium, viruses, whatever the case may be. Because as you can see, it's pretty nasty. So who knows what has developed in that time? Because it might sound kind of funny, like you're wanting the chlorine to be out, but then you add some back in. Well, we're just talking about to kill whatever organics, and organic pathogens had developed in this nasty cesspool during the time that it had been just sitting there. Because chances are, if it's an SHTF situation, you're not going to be running your pool every day. You're not going to be running the pump and keeping it fresh and all that kind of stuff. And again, you'd have to be adding chemicals to keep it fresh too. So that would be counterproductive. So all that to say is that pools can be a great way to store a large amount of water for an SHTF kind of situation. However, you need to think about the process that you're going to use to purify the water and make it safe to drink, you know, once that emergency started happening or whatever. And it could be quite the process. So just keep that in mind, I guess. That's really pretty much all I wanted to throw out about it. And I'll put some links down below to some good filters that I've used in the past. You guys can take a look at them if you want. But it's not a bad option. Additionally, those kiddie pools work pretty good for just setting out in the open and allowing them to collect rain for rainwater. You can buy them for $5 to $10, and you could get 5 or 6 of them and set them out in a rainstorm, and you would have a tremendous amount of fresh water that would be relatively ready to drink, depending on, you know, if you live close to a city, you may have some pollution issues, but for the most part, rainwater is drinkable right there. You can also get those inflatable pools, you know, that are not as big as a pool like this, but they may hold, you know, several hundred gallons, and you could inflate that and fill it with tap water at the beginning of an emergency. You know, while the water was still flowing and all those kinds of things, and that could be a good reservoir to hold a bunch of water. So something to consider. You know, stock tanks are the same way. You could do the same things with those. You could fill them up. Just make sure that they're good and clean. You've got them, you know, cleaned out real well. You know, bleached out. You know, make sure there's no nasties in there from the animals or whatever, if they were being used that way, if they weren't just new. So they are an option, but you got to figure out, what are you going to do? How are you going to clean it up and make sure that you got that all, you know, really nailed down? So it's good to think ahead about water, because having water, enough water on hand, is something that I think almost everybody underestimates. The old saying goes that, you know, it's a gallon a day, gallon per person per day, but that's just to survive in you know, somewhat rigorous conditions in a somewhat mild climate. That amount goes up tremendously when you add a lot of exercise and when you start increasing in temperature. Additionally, when you start adding in sanitation, when you start adding in, you know, cooking your food, you know, so sanitation for yourself, then you got sanitation for dishes, sanitation for your house, sanitation for animals, whatever the case may be. You need to start to really significantly add to the amount of water that you need. And you're really probably talking about a little bit more like 5 to 8 gallons per day that you'd want to have in order to maintain the same standards of health and all that kind of stuff that you currently do. So, you know, it could flex a little bit, but pools and large water containers are a good option. You just got to have something figured out for how you're going to treat them and use them. Now, the other possibility, something that I've been thinking about playing with, and I'll make that on another video, so this doesn't go too long here. So anyway, guys, don't forget to live 6 Ps. Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Take care.